She appeared at the edge of the parking lot like something the darkness had decided to let go. Colt saw her first. He was leaning against the rusted railing outside the Iron Forge on Route 9, rolling his third cigarette of the night, watching the moths beat themselves stupid against the floodlights. It was 10 past 10 on a Thursday, humid, the kind of southern heat that sits on your chest and breathes with you. Inside the bar, 150 men were packed shoulder to shoulder for a full chapter meeting. 4 counties represented the room, thick with noise and smoke, and the heavy thud of music through old walls. Then something moved in the gravel. Low, slow, too small to be a bug, too deliberate to be an animal at all. Colt squinted. The floodlight caught it. A girl, blonde hair matted to her skull, an oversized gray t-shirt hanging past her knees, a man's shirt not hers. No pants, no shoes. Her feet left dark prints on the white gravel as she walked. Blood. She was bleeding from both feet, and she did not seem to notice or care. Colt dropped his cigarette. It hissed against the damp ground. Hey, hey, sweetheart. She did not stop, did not flinch. She walked past the first row of motorcycles, 150 of them packed tight chrome, catching the floodlights like teeth in the dark. She walked past the second row. She walked directly to Colt and stopped 2 feet in front of him. He crouched down. Up close, it was worse. Bruises on both arms, purple and green and yellow, layered like a calendar of pain. Raw marks around her wrists where something had been keyed or gripped too hard too many times. A cut above her left eye, half-healed, crusted brown. Dirt everywhere, under her fingernails ground into her knees and the creases of her neck. She smelled like a basement, like damp concrete and human waste, and the kind of fear that has a scent all its own. Sweetheart, where's your mom? Are you lost? She reached into the collar of the oversized shirt and pulled out a piece of paper folded tight, damp from being pressed against her skin. She held it up with both hands. Colt took it, unfolded it. His face changed. It was not a child's drawing. It was a map, a road straight and narrow. A building rectangular, carefully drawn with something close to architectural precision. A door on the side marked with an X. And below the building underground, a smaller rectangle. Inside that rectangle, small circles. 9 of them. At the bottom, in shaky handwriting, pressed so hard the pencil had torn through in places, 2 words: other kids here. What is this? Colt's voice had dropped to something barely above a whisper. I know where he keeps the others, the girl said. Her voice was thin, steady, practiced like she had rehearsed the sentence 100 times in her head, during the walkover, shaping each word until it was hard and smooth, a stone that could not be ignored. There are more kids under the building. He locks the door, but I know the numbers. Colt stood up. He turned to the 3 men behind him on the porch. One of them, a prospect named Reno, had gone the color of old milk. Get Flint, right now, go. Reno was already moving. Thomas Hargrove came through the front door 40 seconds later. Chapter president, 52 years old. Silver hair pulled back in a band, a face like something carved from hardwood and left out in too many storms. He had heard there was a kid outside and nothing else. He came out expecting a lost child from the neighborhood, maybe a runaway from one of the trailer parks along the creek. Maybe somebody's grandkid who wandered off during the meeting. He saw the girl and stopped in the doorway. The light from inside the bar fell across her. The bruises, the shirt, the bloody footprints on the gravel, and those eyes. He had seen a lot of eyes in 52 years, had looked into the eyes of men who wanted to kill him, and men who were dying, and men who had done things that could not be spoken about in daylight. But he had never seen eyes like this on a child. They were old. Not tired, not broken, old. Like she had been somewhere that aged you from the inside out, and she had come back carrying the weight of it in her stare. Flint moved fast for a man his size. He crossed the porch, came down the 3 steps, and crouched in front of her. His leather vest creaked. The death's head patch was at her eye level. Hey there, I'm Flint. What's your name? Emma. How old are you, Emma? 5. 5. Flint kept his voice level, but something behind his ribs clenched and did not let go. Where'd you come from tonight, sweetheart? She pointed south. Past the overpass, past the old rail yard, into the sprawl of abandoned warehouses and empty lots that made up the industrial district. Dark out there. No streetlights past the overpass. No reason for a 5-year-old to be anywhere near it. The brown building with the tall fence. He parks the white truck inside so nobody can see it. Colt handed Flint the paper. Flint unfolded it, studied the map. His jaw tightened. The tendons in his neck stood out like cables. Who drew this? Me. I found a pencil on the stairs. He dropped it. I hid it under my mattress. And the paper, Drew, it was wrapped around the bread he brought us. Flint looked up at Colt, then back at Emma. How many other kids are in that building? 9, I counted. I'm number 10. The world went quiet, not silent because the bars still thumped behind them and the highway still hummed in the distance, and somewhere a dog was barking at the moon. But the world went quiet in the way it does when something fundamental shifts, when the ground under your feet is no longer the ground it was 3 seconds ago. Colt put his hand on the porch railing and gripped it until his knuckles went white. Reno, standing 3 feet away, turned his back and pressed his fist against his mouth. A sound came out of him that was not a word. Flint did not move. His face did not change. But something behind his eyes locked into place. Something hard and final, like a deadbolt, turning like a decision made so deep in the bone that it was already past the point of questioning. He had felt this before. Once. 15 years ago, standing in a hospital corridor while a doctor told him that his daughter Bree, 6 years old, was not going to make it. That the truck had hit her bicycle at 40 miles an hour and there was nothing left to save. He had felt this exact same locking sensation, this thing that happens when the body decides it is going to do something and the mind simply follows. How long have you been there, Emma? A long time. He took me when there were flowers at the playground. Now there aren't flowers anymore. That was months. Flint did the math in his head and it made him sick. Does he know you're gone? He went upstairs. He was yelling on his phone. He forgot to lock the door. I waited until it was quiet. Then I went up the stairs and pushed the outside door. It opens from the inside without the numbers. But from the outside, you need the numbers. Yes, 3,815. You're sure about them? I watched him do it every time. Every time he went out and came back. Always the same. I counted 7 times. 3,815. Flint folded the paper, put it in the inside pocket of his vest. He stood up. Emma, the girl you mentioned, you said 9 kids. Are they all alive? Emma's face changed just slightly. A tightening around the mouth, a flicker in those 2 old eyes that was something worse than sadness. Nora died 4 days ago. She got sick, coughing, then fever, then she stopped eating. I told him she needed a doctor. He said she'd be fine. She wasn't fine. She stopped breathing in the middle of the night. Emma paused. Her voice did not waver, but her hands pulled at the hem of the oversized shirt, twisting the fabric. He came down and looked at her. He didn't do anything. He just looked and went back upstairs. He left her there, with us, for 4 days. Colt made a sound like he had been punched in the stomach. Wes wouldn't let go of her hand. Emma continued, and now there was something new in her voice, something fierce and raw. He's 6. He held her hand the whole time because he said he didn't want her to be alone. He's still holding it. Flint closed his eyes. Behind his eyelids, he saw Bree's face. 6 years old. Blonde curls and a gap-toothed smile and a laugh that sounded like bells. He had not been able to save her. He had stood in that hospital corridor, and there had been nothing he could do, no amount of rage or love or willingness to trade his own life that could change what had already happened. He opened his eyes. Colt, keep her here. Don't let her out of your sight. He turned and walked back in fun. The bar was packed. Full chapter meeting members from 4 counties plus hangarounds and prospects. Pool tables cracking. 3 televisions blaring different games. Music thumping from the jukebox in the corner. The smell of beer and leather and engine grease. 150 men doing what they did on meeting nights, talking, arguing, laughing, the ordinary rituals of a life lived outside the lines. Flint pushed through the crowd without a word. He climbed onto a chair near the center of the room and put 2 fingers in his mouth and whistled. The kind of whistle that cuts through everything, sharp and loud and final. The sound of authority exercised without apology. The room went dead silent. Every head turned. Church, Flint said. Parking lot, now, all of you. Nobody argued. Nobody asked questions. Chairs scraped back. Bottles were set down. Pool cues laid across felt. 150 men moved toward the door's front backside, and within 2 minutes they were assembled in the gravel lot. Emma stood next to Colt, her hand in his. She looked up at the crowd of men surrounding her. Leather ink beards, scars chains, arms like tree trunks, and faces like road maps of hard living. She did not blink. Flint held up the map. This little girl walked here barefoot from the old industrial district. She escaped from a building where a man is keeping 9 other children underground. One of those children is already dead. She has the access code. She drew us a map. Silence. Absolute silence. The only sound was the wind through the pine trees at the edge of the lot and a dog barking somewhere far away. He doesn't know she's gone yet. We have an hour, maybe less. A man near the front stepped forward. Ox, road captain, 6'6", 280 pounds of chest like the front end of a freight truck. His voice was low and flat. We riding? We're riding. Flint's voice hardened. But listen to me. There are children in that building. We go in controlled. We go in quiet. We get those kids out first. That is the only thing that matters tonight. Are we clear? The answer came back as a single rumble, a sound that rose from 150 throats, at once more vibration than word. Clear. Let's go. Men were already moving to their bikes, keys out, helmets grabbed. Flint turned back to Emma. Sweetheart, you're going to stay here with Colt. No, her voice was flat, not defiant, not scared, certain. The kind of certainty that does not come from stubbornness, but from knowledge. I have to come. There are 2 doors. The outside one has the numbers, but inside you won't know which door leads down. There are other doors, storage rooms. He keeps them locked too. I know which one goes to the kids. You don't. Flint crouched again. He wanted to tell her no. Every instinct he had, every fiber of the man who had lost a daughter and carried that loss like a stone in his chest for 15 years, told him to keep this child as far from that building as humanly possible. But she was looking at him with eyes that had already seen the worst thing a human being can see, and she was telling him she knew things he needed to know. You know which door? The one in the back corner. It's heavier than the others. He uses a key, not numbers. A key on a chain he wears around his neck. A key, not a code. Yes, but sometimes he leaves the keys on the table when he forgets. Like tonight. Flint closed his eyes for 2 seconds. Opened them. Sparrow. A man stepped forward, lean, mid-40s, graying ponytail, calm eyes. Former paramedic. The steadiest rider in the chapter, the man you would trust with your life, or more importantly, someone else's. She rides with you, Flint said. Helmet on. She stays between your arms. If anything at all goes wrong, you turn around, you bring her back here, you calls the police. That is your only job tonight. Sparrow nodded. He walked to his bike, pulled a helmet from the saddlebag. It was far too big. He folded a bandana, stuffed it inside to pad it, tightened the chin strap until it fit. He lifted Emma onto the bike. She sat in front of him, small enough to fit between his arms in the tank. She gripped the handlebars with both hands. Hold on to me, Sparrow said. Not the bars, me. Okay. She let go of the handlebars and grabbed his forearms. Her fingers were so small they barely wrapped around. 150 engines started. The sound was like thunder cracking open the earth. It shook the building. It shook the trees. It shook Emma's entire body. She felt it in her teeth, in her ribs, in the soles of her bleeding feet resting on the engine casing. She pressed her back against Sparrow's chest and felt his heartbeat steady and strong, thumping against her spine. Flint pulled to the front, raised his fist, dropped it forward. The convoy moved. 150 motorcycles pulled out onto Route 9 in a column that stretched a quarter mile. Headlights like a river of white fire cutting through the southern dark. Cars on the road pulled over. People stared from gas station lots. A trucker honked, not in anger, in something like awe, the involuntary response of a man watching something he did not fully understand but knew was important. Emma felt the wind hit her face through the visor, felt the engine humming through her whole body, a vibration that was somehow both terrifying and comforting, like being held by something immensely powerful that had decided to be gentle. She had never been on a motorcycle. She had never been in a car going this fast. Her stomach dropped with every acceleration, every lean into a curve. She started counting streetlights. 1, 2, 3. Counting kept her brain working. Counting kept her from thinking about the other kids, about the dark, about Nora who had stopped breathing 4 days ago, while telling a story about Captain the dog mid-sentence just stopped and nobody came to help. Nobody ever came. 7, 8, 9. She counted 9 lights before the convoy began to slow. Sparrow leaned down close to her ear. Almost there, kiddo. You're doing great. Emma did not respond. Her eyes were locked on the darkness ahead, where the street lights ended and the industrial district began. Where the brown building was where the man was, where 9 children were underground waiting for something they had stopped believing would ever come. Flint raised his left hand. The signal rippled back through the convoy like a wave. Engines dropped to idle. Then one by one they cut out. 150 motorcycles coasted in silence. No engines, no headlights, just the whisper of tires on asphalt and the occasional boot dragging to steer. They stopped 200 yards from the building. Bikes fanned out along the road tucked against fences and loading docks and the rusted hulks of abandoned trucks. In the dark, they were invisible. Flint dismounted, walked to Sparrow's bike, and lifted Emma off. He set her on the ground. She was shaking. Her whole body head to toe, a tremor that came from somewhere deep and would not stop. You okay? She nodded. She was not okay. But she had stopped knowing what okay meant weeks ago. Flint gathered his officers. Colt Ox Preacher, Sparrow, and a dozen others. He spoke in a whisper that carried the weight of a shout. 20 men on entry. The rest form a perimeter. Every door, every window, every gap in that fence. If he runs, he does not get past us. Preacher takes 6 to the back. Ox 4 on the roof access. Colt stays with Emma 50 feet back. She does not get closer until I say clear. Nods all around. No questions. No hesitation. They moved. Silent, fast. The fence was cut in 30 seconds. Wire cutters through chain link, barely a sound. Men flowed through the gap like water splitting into teams covering positions with the efficiency of people who had done difficult things in the dark before. Flynn approached the steel door with 5 men behind him. One dim light above it, buzzing and flickering, the only illumination on the entire building. He looked back toward Emma. She was 50 feet away, standing next to Colt, barely visible in the dark. A small shape against a large one. He punched in the code. 3, 8, 1, 5. A beep. A click. The magnetic lock released. Flint pushed the door open. The smell hit first. It came out of that building like something alive, something that had been growing in the dark for months. Stale air. Human waste. Something chemical like bleach poured over rot in an attempt to cover what could not be covered. And underneath all of it, something worse. The sweet, heavy, unmistakable smell of death. Every man behind Flint caught it at the same time. One of them gagged and turned his head. Another pressed his forearm across his nose and mouth. Flint walked straight in. The space was open, dark, empty. Concrete floor. He clicked on a flashlight and swept the beam across the room. A folding table in the center. A chair. A plate with old food crusted and turning green. A phone charger plugged into the wall. And on the table, a ring of keys. Flint's heart hammered. He picked up the keys without a word. 5 on the ring. He looked at the far corner. A heavy metal door, newer than everything else in the building, reinforced with a deadbolt that gleamed dully in the flashlight beam. He walked to it. Tried the first key. Nothing. Second key. Nothing. Third key. The deadbolt turned, then footsteps above them. Every man froze. The ceiling creaked. Someone was walking on the second floor. A toilet flushed. More footsteps, heavy, careless, the footsteps of a man who did not know that his world was about to end. A door closed. Flint held up his hand. Wait. 30 seconds of silence. 40, 50, nothing. He turned the handle and opened the door. A staircase going down. Narrow. Concrete steps with no railing. One bare bulb at the bottom casting a yellow light that made everything look sick. The smell from below was concentrated now, thick enough to taste. Sweat, urine, fear. The smell of human beings kept too long in too small a space, with too little food and no way out, and no reason to believe anyone friend would ever come. Flint went down first. Each step deliberate, placing his weight carefully, keeping his breathing controlled. At the bottom, another door. This one was slightly ajar, just like Emma had said. He had not locked it. He had been on his phone yelling distracted, careless in his routine, and that carelessness had cracked the world open. Flint pushed the door open. He made a sound that he would never be able to describe to another human being. Not a word, not a groan, not a cry, just air leaving his body, all of it, like he had been punched in the chest by something too large and too terrible to have a name. 9 children. The youngest could not have been more than 3. A boy curled on a thin foam pad, sucking his thumb, eyes wide and blank, the eyes of a child who had stopped processing the world around him because the world around him had become something that could not be processed. He was wearing an oversized men's t-shirt that came down past his feet. His name was Colby, but Flint did not know that yet. The oldest was maybe 8. A boy sitting upright against the wall with his arms around 2 smaller children, shielding them with his body even in sleep. Drew. He had been there the longest, since winter. 5 months in a room the size of a parking space. They were thin. They were filthy. Their hair was matted, their skin gray with grime. Bruises covered their arms and legs, visible, even in the dim light. A boy had a rag wrapped around his forearm, brown with old blood. 2 girls lay on their pads with their faces to the wall, not sleeping, just staring the blank stare of children who had retreated so far inside themselves that the surface was just a shell. And in the far corner, Nora, red hair spread across the foam pad like rust, eyes half open, seeing nothing, fixed on a point somewhere past the ceiling, past the building, past everything. She had been gone for 4 days. Her skin was the color of old wax. The boy next to her, Wes, was sitting cross-legged, holding her hand. He had not let go. He was awake, looking at Flint with enormous brown eyes and still holding Nora Pritchard's hand because he had promised himself he would not let her be alone. Ox came down the stairs behind Flint. He saw the room. His hand went to his face. He turned around, took 2 steps back up, and made a sound that came from somewhere deep and broken, the sound of a man whose size and strength meant nothing in the face of this. Then he came back down. Because the children were looking at them, and someone had to say something. Flint crouched, made himself small. These children had learned to fear large men. He knew that. He had to be careful. He had to be gentle. He had to be the thing he had not been in 15 years since Bree, since the hospital, since the moment he had decided that gentleness was a luxury he could not afford. "Hey there," he said, his voice cracked. He cleared his throat and tried again. "My name is Flint. That's a funny name, I know. I'm here to take you out of this place. Right now, tonight. Nobody is going to hurt you anymore." Nobody moved, nobody spoke. Drew pulled the 2 smaller children closer. The girls against the wall did not turn around. "I know you're scared. You have every right to be, but there are people upstairs who are going to help you. And outside, there are 150 of my friends, and nobody is getting past them. Not tonight, not ever." A small voice from the back of the room. Wes, still holding Nora's hand, his ribs showing through his shirt, dark circles under his eyes like bruises. "Is Emma okay?" Flint's throat closed. He swallowed hard. "Emma's okay. She's upstairs. She's the one who brought us here." "She said she'd come back," Wes said. "She promised." She kept her promise. Wes stood up. His legs were unsteady, trembling from malnutrition and weeks of barely moving. He walked to Flint and reached out his hand. Flint took it. The boy's hand was so small it disappeared inside his own swallowed hole, and the grip was fierce. The grip of a child who had been in the dark for so long that any hand reaching toward him was worth holding with everything he had. "I want to go outside," Wes said. "Please, I want to go outside." One by one the others stood. Ox picked up Colby, the 3-year-old, who weighed nothing. The boy buried his face in Ox's leather vest and gripped the patches with fingers like twigs. Preacher carried a girl with a swollen ankle who could not walk. 2 other men came down and gently, carefully lifted or guided each child up the stairs. Drew was the last to stand. He looked at Flint. "There's 10 of us," Drew said. "Not 9, Nora too." "I know," Flint said. "We'll take care of her. I promise." Drew stared at him for a long moment, then nodded and walked up the stairs. Flint was the last to leave the basement. He stood at the door and looked back at Nora Pritchard, 7 years old, red hair lying on a foam pad, in a room underground where she had died because a man had decided her life was not worth a phone call to a doctor. He did not know her name yet, but he would. And he would carry it with him for the rest of his life, the way he carried Bree's name, The way he carried every name of every person he had failed to save, and every person he had managed to save, and every person who fell somewhere in between. He pulled the door closed behind him, quietly, like closing something that should never have been opened. Upstairs, the man heard them. He had been asleep on the second floor. The noise woke him. Boots on concrete, voices, the unmistakable sound of his steel door opening from the inside. He came down the internal staircase in sweatpants and a flannel shirt, the red and black plaid that Emma had described rubbing his eyes with the confusion of a man dragged from sleep. He stepped into the open room and found 6 men in leather vests staring at him in the beam of multiple flashlights. His name was Dale Murchison, 44 years old, brown hair going gray at the temples. Average height, average build, an unremarkable face, the kind of face you see at a gas station or a grocery store and forget before you reach the parking lot. He looked like someone's neighbor. He looked like someone who coached Little League or fixed lawnmowers on weekends. He saw the men, the leather, the patches, the fury carved into every face, and he ran. Ox caught him in 3 steps. It was not even close. Ox grabbed the back of his shirt with one hand, lifted him clean off his feet, and brought him down on the concrete floor. The impact shook dust from the ceiling beams. Murchison screamed, "Help somebody!" "Nobody's coming," Ox said. His voice was the calmest thing in the room. "Well, that's not true. The police are coming. They're just going to take a little longer than we did." Flint walked over, stood above him, looked down. His fists were clenched so tight his fingernails cut half-moon shapes into his palms, and blood welled up between his fingers. Every cell in his body was screaming at him to do something that would feel righteous and just and necessary. Every memory of Bree, every image of those children in the basement, every atom of rage that he had been carrying for 15 years was telling him to end this man right here on this floor. But outside, 8 children were being carried to safety, and those children needed this man alive in a courtroom answering for what he had done. Not beaten on a warehouse floor by a man whose grief had finally found a target. "Zip him," Flint said, "and don't touch him again." They zip-tied Murchison's hands behind his back. He was crying now. "You don't understand. I was helping them. I was taking care of—" "Shut your mouth," Colt said from the doorway. His voice was quiet, and the quietness of it was worse than any shout. "Shut your mouth, or I will shut it for you, and nobody in this room will stop me." Murchison shut his mouth. Flint pulled out his phone and handed it to Preacher. "Call 911. Tell them everything. Tell them to send every ambulance in the county." Preacher dialed. Flint walked outside. Emma was standing behind a concrete barrier where Colt had kept her. She was watching the children being carried out. She recognized them even in the dark, even wrapped in oversized leather jackets that members had pulled off their own backs. Maya, Wes, Colby, Drew, the others. She counted them the way she counted everything. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 8. "Where's Nora?" she asked Colt. "The girl with the red hair. Where is she?" Colt looked at her. He opened his mouth, closed it. He was a man who had spent 30 years in a motorcycle club, who had seen violence and grief and the hard edge of every kind of living. And he could not find a single word to say to this 5-year-old girl. He did not have to. Emma read it on his face. The way she read the code on the door. The way she read the lock on the building. The way she read every piece of information the world gave her, because reading things accurately was the only power she had ever had. She sat down on the ground, pulled her knees to her chest, wrapped her arms around her shins. She rocked, slightly forward and back, the same rhythm Nora used to use before she stopped moving. "I knew," Emma whispered. "I knew before I left. She wasn't breathing anymore. I told her to hold on. I told her I was going to get help." She didn't answer. Colt crouched next to her. He put his massive hand on her small back. He did not say it was okay. He did not say it would be all right. Because it was not okay and it would not be all right, and he respected her enough not to lie to her. "You did everything you could," he said, more than anyone could have asked. Emma pressed her face against her knees. Her shoulders trembled, but she did not cry, Mom. She had stopped being able to cry weeks ago somewhere in that basement, Somewhere between the 31st meal and the 30 seconds, somewhere in the long dark hours when the only sound was Nora's breathing, getting slower and softer until it was not there at all. Sirens in the distance, getting closer. Flint walked over. He looked at Emma. He looked at the children being wrapped in jackets, in blankets being held by men who had tattoos and criminal records, and hands that could break a man's jaw, but were holding these children as if they were made of glass. He looked at the building behind him. Then he looked at the sky, dark, full of stars, impossibly wide after what he had seen in that basement. He crouched next to Emma. "Your mama," he said. "What's her name?" "Rachel." "Rachel Calloway." Emma looked at him. "How do you know her last name?" Flint did not answer, but in his mind the connection was already made. The Amber Alert from April, the missing girl, the news coverage, the mother on television crying, begging, holding up a school photograph and asking, "Anyone please, if you have seen my daughter." Emma Calloway, age 5, last seen at Maxwell Park Playground, found alive. He put his hand on top of Emma's head, gently, the way you touch something precious, something that has been through fire and come out the other side still whole. "She's been looking for you," Flint said. "Every single day. She never stopped." He said she stopped looking. He said nobody was looking for me anymore. He said nobody cared. He lied. Mamas don't stop looking. Not ever. Emma's lip trembled. For the first time that night, something cracked behind her eyes. Something that looked like hope. Fragile. Terrified. But there. The sirens were close now. Blue and red light flickering at the edge of the industrial district, painting the sky. "They're coming," Flint said. "The doctors, the police, everyone. They're going to take care of you. And your mama is going to be here soon." "Promise." "I promise." Emma looked at him for a long time, then she reached out and touched the death's head patch on his vest. Her small finger traced the logo. She did not know what it meant. She did not care. It was the symbol on the chest of the man who had come when no one else would, and that was all the meaning it needed. "Thank you," she said. Flint's jaw worked. He nodded once, turned away, walked toward the road where 150 of his brothers stood in the dark, silent among their bikes. He stopped halfway, put his hands on his knees, bent over, and took a breath that shuddered through his entire body. He thought about Bree. He thought about 6 years old and a bicycle, in a truck, in a hospital corridor, and a doctor's voice saying the words that had ended one version of his life and begun another. He had not been able to save Bree. He had carried that for 15 years like a stone in his chest, and it had made him hard, and it had made him distant, and it had made him the kind of man who climbed onto chairs and whistled and sent 150 men into the dark. Because if he could not save his own daughter, he would spend the rest of his life making sure that when someone else's daughter needed saving, there would be someone there. He straightened up, set his jaw, walked to meet the police. The first cruiser came around the corner with its lights on and siren off. Then a second, a third, then 2 ambulances, then a black SUV with no markings that Flint recognized immediately as federal. He stood in the middle of the road, hands visible, palms out. Behind him, 150 men stood among their bikes, silent and still. The flashing red and blue lights swept across their faces and made the whole scene look like something pulled from a dream that could not decide whether it was a nightmare or a miracle. Sergeant Fenton stepped out of the lead cruiser, stocky mid-40s, a face that had seen too many shifts and not enough sleep. His hand was on his weapon. "Who's in charge here?" "I am," Flint said. "Thomas Hargrove. My man Preacher made the call. You called in a child abduction situation. There are 8 children alive inside that building. 1 deceased. The suspect is inside, zip-tied on the floor. He is unharmed. We did not touch him beyond restraining him." Fenton looked at Flint, looked past him at the wall of bikers, looked at the building. His hand moved slowly away from his weapon. 8 children. 8 alive. 1 did not make it. A girl. She's still in the basement. Jesus Christ. There's a 10th child out here with us. She's the one who escaped and brought us here. 5 years old, named as Emma Calloway. Fenton's face went white. The color drained from it so fast it was like watching a screen go dark. "Emma Calloway. The Amber Alert, Emma Calloway." "That's the one." Fenton turned to the officer behind him. "Get on the radio, now. Tell dispatch we have Emma Calloway alive. Tell them to contact the mother immediately." Tell them to send child services, FBI, everyone. Go. The officer ran back to his cruiser. Fenton looked at Flint again. Something complicated was happening on his face, the collision of relief and duty and the uncomfortable reality of what he was looking at. You broke into that building. Yes. With a child. She had the access code. She knew the layout. We would not have gotten in without her. That doesn't make it legal. No, Flint said. It doesn't. They stared at each other for 3 seconds. Two men on opposite sides of a line that had never felt less important than it did right now. Fenton shook his head and walked toward the building. Over his shoulder, he called back. Nobody leaves, not one of you. We're not going anywhere, Flint said. The paramedics moved fast. 2 teams through the front door. A third team came to Emma. She was still sitting on the ground behind the barrier, knees to her chest rocking. A female paramedic, young dark hair, pulled back. Hands that moved with practiced gentleness crouched in front of her. Hi, sweetie. My name is Jess. Can I take a look at you? Emma held out her arms without being asked, like she was used to being examined by people she did not know. Jess looked at the bruises, looked at the wrists, looked at the feet cut and swollen, caked with dried blood and gravel. You walked on these feet tonight. Yes, that must have hurt a lot. I didn't really feel it. Jess cleaned the cuts carefully. Emma did not flinch. Not once. They loaded her into an ambulance. Sparrow stood 10 feet away watching. As the paramedics lifted Emma onto the stretcher, she turned her head and found him. Sparrow, he stepped closer. Thank you for the ride. Sparrow's face broke. Not dramatically. He was a man who kept things inside. But his chin dropped and his eyes squeezed shut for just a second. He nodded. Could not speak. The ambulance doors closed. The last thing Emma saw through the back windows was Sparrow standing in the road, one hand raised, not waving, just holding his hand up like a promise. The hospital was a different kind of overwhelming. After months in the dark, the fluorescent lights felt like needles in Emma's eyes. A nurse named Patricia, big woman, warm voice, wheeled her into a small examination room and checked her vitals. Heart rate elevated, blood pressure low, dehydrated, malnourished, multiple contusions, lacerations on both feet, a partially healed fracture in her left wrist that had never been set properly. Sweetheart, does your arm hurt? Patricia asked, gently rotating Emma's wrist. Not anymore. It hurt a lot at first. When he grabbed me, something cracked, but then it stopped hurting after a while. While they worked, Emma asked for food. Patricia brought a sandwich, juice, and jello. Emma ate everything in 3 minutes, asked for more. Patricia brought another sandwich and a banana. Emma ate half the sandwich before her stomach seized and she had to stop. Take it slow, Patricia said. Your tummy needs to get used to eating again. He only brought food once a day, sometimes just bread, sometimes nothing. Patricia set the tray aside, turned her back to Emma for just a moment. When she turned back, her eyes were red, but her voice was steady. You're safe here. Nobody's going to forget to feed you, I promise. Detective Brannigan arrived next. He pulled a chair close, sat at eye level. Emma, I know you're tired, but I need to hear everything from you, starting from the beginning. Emma looked at her hands. The fingernails were still ragged and bitten down to nothing, a nervous habit she had never had before the basement. Maxwell Park, she said. I was on the swings. My mom was on the bench. She was talking on her phone. She told him everything. The man with the fake lost puppy named Snowball. The cloth that smelled like medicine. Waking up in the truck with Wes and a crying girl. The building, the basement, the foam pieces, the bucket, the single light, 6 children already there. 53 meals in 2 months. The man who hit her for asking for food, who grabbed her wrist so hard something cracked, who kicked Wes for crying, who turned off the light and left them in darkness for hours when he was angry. She told him about Nora, the cough, the fever, the shaking, how she had yelled at the man, begged for a doctor, how he said she would be fine, how Nora stopped eating, stopped talking, stopped breathing, how the man came down and looked at her body and walked back upstairs without a word, how he left her there for 4 days, how Wes held her hand the entire time. Drew banged on the door, Emma said, and her voice had an edge that no 5-year-old's voice should have. He yelled and yelled. He said Nora wasn't breathing. The man came down and looked at her. He didn't do anything. He just looked at her and went back upstairs. Emma, the bikers. Did they tell you what to say to the police? No. Did they ask you to protect them? No. Flint told me to tell the truth, all of it. He said don't leave anything out and don't protect them. Brannigan nodded. He picked up his tablet and stood. You did good, Emma. You did real good. He walked to the door, stepped into the hallway, leaned against the wall, pressed his fingers to the bridge of his nose, and took 3 long breaths. Then he straightened up and went to file his report. 20 minutes later, the door burst open. A woman came through it like a storm. Blonde hair everywhere, mascara smeared, a coat thrown over pajama pants and slippers. She had driven 40 minutes in 12. She had run 3 red lights. She had left her car in a fire lane with the engine still running. Rachel Calloway saw her daughter sitting on the examination table in an oversized hospital gown, feet bandaged, arm in a temporary splint, and she made a sound that was not a word. It was something older than language, something that came from the place where a mother keeps the worst fear she has ever felt, locked away, burning without oxygen for 2 months straight. Baby. She crossed the room in 2 steps. Baby, oh God, baby. Emma slid off the table. Her bandaged feet hit the floor and she winced. But she did not stop. She ran. 3 steps. Her mother caught her, swept her up, pulled her so close that Emma could hear her heartbeat slamming against her ribs. Rachel sank to the floor, holding Emma, rocking, sobbing so hard she could not breathe. I looked for you every day. Every single day. I never stopped. I put up signs. I went on TV. I drove around looking. I never stopped. He lied to you. Do you hear me? He lied. I know, Emma said. Her voice was muffled against her mother's neck. Flint told me. He said mamas don't stop looking. Rachel pulled back, held Emma at arm's length. Her eyes were swollen, mascara tracked down her cheeks, her face wrecked and raw. She looked at the bandages, the splint, the fading bruises. What did he do to you, baby? What did he do? I don't want to talk about it right now. Rachel's face shattered. She pulled Emma close again. I'm sorry, I'm so sorry. I was on the phone at the park. I wasn't watching. If I'd been watching, Mom, stop. It's my fault. Mom, stop. It's not your fault. It's his fault. He took me, not you. Rachel held her daughter and cried. Emma held her mother and did not. She pressed her face into Rachel's hair and breathed in. Shampoo, coffee, the laundry detergent they used at home, the one that came in the blue bottle and smelled like clean sheets on Saturday mornings. Smells she had been trying to remember for weeks in the dark and could not. She could remember them now. They stayed like that on the hospital floor for a long time. A nurse looked in, saw them, and quietly closed the door. In the hallway outside, Flint sat on a bench, Sparrow next to him. Both still in their vests, still smelling like exhaust and sweat and the inside of that building. They looked wrong here. Leather and denim among white coats and scrubs. They could hear Rachel crying through the door. They could hear Emma's voice, small and steady. Sparrow stared at the floor. She's 5 years old, Flint. I know. She walked 2 miles on those feet. She memorized a 4-digit code. She drew a map. She walked into a bar full of us and asked for help. She's 5. I know. My daughter's 6. I can't get her to remember where she puts her shoes. Flint did not respond. He was staring at a poster on the wall. Hand hygiene. 5 steps with cartoon illustrations. He read it 3 times without absorbing a single word. We're getting charged, Sparrow said. You know that? I know. Was it worth it? Flint turned and looked at him. You carried a 3-year-old boy out of that basement tonight. He held onto your vest so tight you'll have to replace the stitching. You're asking me if it was worth it? Sparrow nodded slowly. Yeah, stupid question. A door opened down the hall. Rachel Calloway stepped out, Emma in her arms. Emma's head was on her mother's shoulder, eyes half closed. Rachel saw Flint. Their eyes met. Are you Flint? Yes, ma'am. Rachel shifted Emma on her hip, took 2 steps forward. She reached out and grabbed his hand, squeezed hard. Her grip was shaking. Thank you, she said. Her voice broke on the second word. Thank you for bringing my baby back. Flint looked at her hand around his, looked at Emma, looked at Rachel's face. She brought herself back, he said. We just followed. Rachel squeezed his hand one more time. Then she turned and walked down the hallway, Emma pressed against her chest. Flint watched them go until they turned a corner and disappeared. Then he sat back down, put his elbows on his knees, and pressed his palms flat against his face. Sparrow put a hand on his shoulder. Neither of them said anything. Rachel did not sleep that night. She sat in a chair next to Emma's hospital bed, watching her daughter breathe. In, out, in, out. She counted each breath the way a drowning person counts the distance to shore. 2 days later, Emma went home. Rachel carried her through the front door. Emma stood very still in the living room, looking at everything. It's the same, Emma said. Of course it's the same. I thought it would be different. Nothing changed here, baby. Everything was waiting for you. Emma walked to her bedroom. Her bed was made. Her stuffed animals were lined up on the pillow. A bear, a rabbit, a frog. Her purple backpack hung on the hook by the door, packed for a school day that never happened. She climbed onto the bed, pulled the bear close, pressed her face into its fur. It smelled like home. Mom, yeah. Can you leave the light on tonight? I'll leave every light in the house on. That first week was hard in ways Rachel had not expected. Emma did not cry, did not scream. She was quiet, too quiet. She ate when food was put in front of her, but never asked for it. She slept with every light on and woke at exactly 3 in the morning. Every night, the time the man used to check on them. She drew constantly, but she drew only one thing. The building. Over and over. The brown rectangle, the fence, the door marked with an X. Rachel found 17 drawings in 3 days. On the 4th day, Rachel sat next to her. Sweetheart, you keep drawing the same thing. I know. Do you want to draw something else? Not yet. Why not? Amma put down her crayon. Because I need to remember it exactly right for when I have to tell them in court. I need to remember everything. You don't have to think about court right now. Yes, I do. If I want him to go to prison, I have to testify. And I want him to go to prison. Baby. He killed Nora's mom. He didn't shoot her or stab her, but he killed her. She was sick, and he didn't help her. She asked for help, and he didn't care. So I have to go to court and tell them exactly what happened. Every single detail. Because Nora can't. On day 6, the charges came down. Not just against Murchison. Those had already been filed. 12 counts of kidnapping, 10 counts of false imprisonment, multiple counts of aggravated assault on minors, 1 count of involuntary manslaughter for Nora Pritchard. The new charges were against the bikers. Flint Colt Ox, Sparrow Preacher, and 15 other members of the entry team were charged with breaking and entering criminal trespass, assault, and battery and reckless endangerment of a minor. Half the country was outraged. A petition to drop the charges gathered 300,000 signatures in 2 days. The other half argued that vigilante justice was still illegal. Emma saw it by accident. Rachel had left the television on, and Flint's booking photograph appeared on screen. Emma dropped her crayon. Mom, that's Flint. They arrested him. He saved us. Why are they arrested? The law says they weren't supposed to go into that building without permission. Whose permission? The police. A judge. The police didn't come. I walked 2 miles and there were no police. I know, but there are rules. The rules are wrong. Rachel did not have an argument for that. The next morning, Pete Langford came to their apartment. Former federal prosecutor, current defense attorney, 32 years of practice, and grandfather of Maya Langford, 7 years old, one of the 9 surviving children. He was in his 60s, silver hair, wire-rimmed glasses. He shook Rachel's hand with both of his. Mrs. Calloway, my granddaughter Maya was in that basement. Your daughter saved her life. He sat at their kitchen table and explained the situation. The legal concept of necessity, the 2 trials ahead, the strategy. Emma will be a witness in Murchison's trial, but she might also be called in the bikers case. The lawyer defending the man who took you is going to try to use the bikers against you. He'll say they coached you. Flint told me to tell the truth, Emma said. Don't leave anything out. Don't protect them. Langford nodded slowly. And that is exactly what a jury needs to hear. He stood, buttoned his jacket, looked at Emma one more time. I've been a lawyer for 32 years. I've argued in front of the Supreme Court. I have never met anyone braver than you. I'm not brave, I'm just 5. I didn't know I was supposed to be scared of doing the right thing. Inside the apartment, after Langford left, Emma went back to her drawing. But this time she did not draw the building. She drew a courtroom, a big rectangle with rows of seats, a small figure in the witness chair, and in the gallery a row of men in leather vests. She held it up to show Rachel. "Practice," she said. 3 weeks after the rescue, the grand jury convened. Murchison was indicted on all counts. The bikers were indicted separately. 2 trials, 2 sets of charges, one story being pulled in 2 directions. Emma drew the building 23 times. Then on the 24th day she stopped. She picked up a clean piece of paper and drew 150 motorcycles, tiny rectangles in a long line stretching from one edge of the paper to the other. Below them in wobbly but determined handwriting, 3 words. "They came for us." Rachel found it on the kitchen table that night. She held the paper to her chest and stood alone in the kitchen and cried until she could not breathe. August came. The trial of Dale Murchison was set for August 14th. The prosecutor, Angela Merritt, mid-40s, sharp, relentless, had met with Emma 3 times to prepare her. "She doesn't need preparation," Merritt told Rachel. "She needs a childhood. But since we can't give her that right now, we'll settle for a conviction." The morning of the trial, Rachel dressed Emma in a blue dress with white flowers. Thrift store, $7. She knelt in front of her daughter and straightened the collar. "You don't have to do this. Nobody will blame you if you say no." Emma looked at her. "Nora can't do it." The courthouse was chaos. Inside the courtroom was packed. Murchison sat at the defense table clean-shaven, wearing a button-down shirt and slacks. He looked ordinary. His attorney, Martin Hale, sat beside him. 45 tailored suit, a career built on getting guilty people reduced sentences. The first day was procedural. Merritt laid out the case. Hale went after the rescue, the compromised evidence, the unreliable 5-year-old witness. Day 2. Emma's name was called. She walked to the witness stand, climbed up herself. Her feet did not reach the floor. She folded her hands in her lap and looked straight ahead. 200 people. Not a sound. "Emma, can you tell the court how old you are?" "Because." "And do you know why you're here today?" "Because a man took me and 9 other kids and put us in a basement, and one of them died. And I have to tell you what happened so he goes to prison." She told the story, every detail, the park, the puppy, the cloth, the truck, the building, the basement, 53 meals, Nora getting sick, Nora stopping breathing, the man looking at her body and walking back upstairs. Hale stood for cross-examination. He tried to undermine her memory. "Isn't it possible you're remembering some of these details wrong? You were very scared, very young." "I remember the number on the door, 3815. I remember 53 meals. I remember Nora's stories about Captain the dog. I remember Wes holding Nora's hand for 4 days after she died because he didn't want her to be alone. I remember the smell of that room. I'll remember it when I'm old. I remember everything." No further questions. Emma climbed down from the stand. As she passed the defense table, she stopped. She looked at Murchison. "You said nobody was coming for me," Emma said. Her voice carried through the silent courtroom. "You were wrong." The trial continued for 5 more days. Other witnesses testified. The medical examiner said Nora Pritchard died of untreated pneumonia, entirely preventable. Grant Pritchard. Nora's father sat in the 3rd row every single day. He never spoke. He never moved. Nora's mother, Helen Pritchard, testified about the morning Nora disappeared from a school bus stop. She had turned around for 10 seconds to grab Nora's lunch. When she came back, Nora was gone. Merritt's closing was devastating. She put Nora Pritchard's school photo on the screen, a girl with red hair and a gap-toothed smile. "The defense wants you to focus on how those children were rescued. I'm asking you to focus on why they needed rescuing." The jury deliberated for 91 minutes. Guilty. All counts. Every single one. Grant Pritchard stood up for the first time in 7 days, walked out, drove to the cemetery and sat beside his daughter's headstone for 3 hours. Rachel called Langford from the parking lot. Langford put Flint on the phone. "Hey, kiddo." They said guilty on everything. "I heard." "We did that." Flint was quiet for a long time. "How you doing, Emma, for real?" "I sleep with the lights on. I draw the building a lot, but I'm eating more." "Good. Your trial is next month. Are you scared?" "A little, but not for me. I'm going to tell the truth." "I know you will. Listen, tell your mom I said thank you." For what? For raising a kid who walks 2 miles barefoot to save 9 strangers. That doesn't happen by accident. Emma looked at her mother. Rachel was gripping the steering wheel, tears streaming. I'll tell her. Goodbye, Emma. Bye, Flint. Rachel put her head on the steering wheel and sobbed. Emma climbed between the seats and put her arms around her mother's neck. It's okay, Mommy. We're okay. That night, for the first time since coming home, Emma did not wake up at 3 in the morning. She slept through until sunrise. On her nightstand was her latest drawing, not the building. A house, 2 stick figures both smiling, a large yellow sun, and in the corner, a single motorcycle. September arrived the way storms do in the South, slow and heavy. Flint had spent the week since Murchison's conviction waiting for lawyers, waiting for court dates, waiting for someone else to decide whether the thing he had done was a crime or a mercy. The courtroom was the same one, same judge, Caldwell. But the energy had shifted. This trial was about the people who had stopped the evil, and nobody seemed to know how to feel about that. Flint sat at the defense table in a dark suit, no vest, no patches. His silver hair is pulled back neat. He looked wrong, smaller somehow. The suit did not fit the way his vest did not in tailoring, but in identity. Colt sat behind him in the gallery, also in a suit looking like a bear that had been talked into attending a dinner party. Ox, Sparrow Preacher, and 15 others filled 2 rows. All in suits, all uncomfortable, all facing felony charges for carrying children out of a hole in the ground. Assistant District Attorney Robert Fenn laid out the prosecution's case with the enthusiasm of a man reading his own indictment. The Hells Angels entered private property without a warrant. They assaulted Dale Murchison. They brought a 5-year-old child on a motorcycle at high speed into an active crime scene. These are crimes. The law does not have an exception for good intentions. Langford's opening was 4 minutes long. He stood in front of the jury, hands in his pockets. My granddaughter Maya spent 3 months in a basement. She is 7 years old. She weighs 41 pounds because a man starved her. She's alive because the men sitting at that table did not wait for permission to save her. The prosecution wants you to punish them for that. I am asking you to look at what they actually did and decide whether this country still believes that protecting children matters more than protecting procedure. The silence that followed lasted long enough to become its own kind of testimony. Fenn called his witnesses. Sergeant Fenton described arriving to find the bikers already inside, the children already out. Langford cross-examined him. Sergeant, how long would it have taken your department to obtain a warrant and execute a raid on that building? 4 to 6 hours. And in your professional opinion, what might have happened to those children in 4 to 6 hours if the suspect discovered one of them was missing? Fenton swallowed. He either flees or he eliminates the witnesses. Eliminates meaning kills. Yes, Gloria Stokes from Child Protective Services testified about Emma's emotional attachment to her rescuers. Langford dismantled it with surgical precision. Ms. Stokes, did Emma ever lie to you? No. Did she ever change her story? No. Did she ever say anything that contradicted the physical evidence? No. So her attachment to the bikers did not affect the accuracy of her testimony in any way. That's correct. A use of force expert testified that Ox's takedown of Murchison constituted assault. Langford asked a single question. If you were in a building with 9 captive children and the man who had kidnapped and starved them came down the stairs, what would you do? The expert paused. I would restrain him. Using force. If necessary, yes. As Mr. Oxford did. Yes. Langford called his own witnesses. Detective Brannigan testified that Flint had cooperated fully and told Emma to tell the truth without protecting the bikers. Just the paramedic described the condition of the children. Then Langford called Emma. Rachel had fought it. She had sat across from Langford and said no, absolutely not. Her daughter had already testified once. It was Emma who ended the argument. I'll do it, Mom. Baby, you don't have to. I know, but I want to. I want them to hear it from me. The first time Emma had testified, she had been a witness describing a crime. This time she was a shield standing between the men who had saved her and the system that wanted to punish them for it. She felt the difference in her bones as she climbed into the witness chair. She wore the same blue dress, same white flowers. Her feet still did not reach the floor. She folded her hands in her lap and looked at the jury. 12 faces looking back at her. Langford approached her gently. Emma, on the night you escaped, why did you go to the biker bar? Because I needed help, and they were there. Did you consider calling the police? I didn't have a phone. I didn't know where a police station was. I didn't know where anything was. I just ran until I saw people. When you showed the bikers your map, what did you expect them to do? Emma thought about it. I expected them to come. And they did. Why did you insist on going with them? Because there are two doors. The outside one with the code and the inside one that goes to the basement. The map didn't show that. If they went without me, they might have gone to the wrong door. Or they might not have known which key to use. I knew the building. I'd been in it for 2 months. I knew things they needed to know. Were you scared? Yes. My hands were shaking the whole time. But the kids in the basement were more scared than me. They'd been there longer. Emma, if the bikers hadn't come that night, what do you think would have happened? Fen stood. Objection. Speculation. Caldwell looked at Emma, looked at Fen, a long pause. I'll allow it. The witness has direct knowledge of the circumstances. Emma looked at Langford. Her hands tightened against each other. He would have found out I was gone. He checked on us every night before he slept. He would have come downstairs and found me missing. She stopped. Her gaze went somewhere far away for a moment, back to the basement, back to the dark. He wouldn't have let the others talk about it. He couldn't risk them telling someone. What do you mean by that? I mean they would have ended up like Nora. The courtroom went dead. Not quiet, dead. The air itself seemed to stop moving. A juror in the back row put his hand over his mouth. Another was gripping the armrest of her chair until her fingers were white. Langford let the silence hold. 5 full seconds. 6. 7. No further questions. Fen stood for cross-examination. He looked at Emma. Emma looked back at him. She did not look afraid. She looked like a child who had already faced the worst thing the world could do and had decided that a man in a suit asking questions was not going to be the thing that broke her. Fen opened his mouth, closed it. He looked at the jury, looked at Emma. He stood there for 3 seconds that felt like 3 minutes. No questions for this witness. He sat down. He knew. Every person in that room knew. You do not cross-examine the child who crawled out of hell to save the others. Emma climbed down from the chair. She walked past the defense table, and as she did, Flint reached out and touched her shoulder. Just briefly. Just enough for her to feel it. She looked at him, and something passed between them that no one else in the courtroom could see. Langford's closing argument lasted 12 minutes. He did not raise his voice once. The prosecution has proven beyond any doubt that my clients broke the law. They entered private property without authorization. They physically restrained a suspect. They brought a child into a dangerous situation. All of those things happened. All of those things are technically illegal. He paused, looked at the jury, one face at a time. But the law also asks you to consider context, to consider necessity, to consider what a reasonable person would do when a barefoot, bleeding 5-year-old girl walks up to you at 10 o'clock at night and tells you that 9 children are locked underground, and you have 1 hour before the man who put them there finds out she's gone. He walked closer to the jury box. What would you have done? Would you have called 911 and waited 4 to 6 hours for a warrant, while a man who had already let 1 child die decided what to do about the one who ran? Would you have told a bleeding 5-year-old to sit tight while you filled out paperwork? Or would you have done exactly what these men did, which is get on your bikes and go? He turned and looked at Flint. Thomas Hargrove is not a perfect man. None of these men are. They have records. They have histories. They are not the people you would put on a poster for community service. But on the night of June 8th, when a child needed help and no one else was there, they were the ones who answered. They were the ones who carried 8 children out of a hole in the ground. They were the ones who held a 3-year-old boy against their chest while he cried. They were the ones who stood in the dark 150 strong, making sure no one else got hurt. He walked back to the defense table, put his hand on Flint's shoulder. You can convict these men. The law gives you that right. But before you do, ask yourself one question. If your child was in that basement, your grandchild, your niece, your neighbor's kid, would you want someone to wait for a warrant? Or would you want someone to come? He sat down. The jury deliberated for 4 hours and 11 minutes. the longest 4 hours of Flint's life. He sat in a holding room with Langford drinking bad coffee, saying nothing. Colt paced. Ox sat motionless against the wall. Sparrow turned a coin over and over in his fingers, a quarter flipping it across his knuckles in an endless loop. Flint thought about Bree, about the hospital corridor, about the way fluorescent light looks at 2 in the morning when your world is ending. He thought about Emma standing in the parking lot of the Iron Forge with blood on her feet and a map in her hand. He thought about the basement, about carrying Colby up those stairs, the boy's weight almost nothing, his grip on the leather almost everything. The bailiff came. Jury's back. They filed into the courtroom. Emma and Rachel were in the gallery. Emma was holding her mother's hand. She did not look scared. She looked ready. The foreman stood, a man in his 60s, retired teacher, glasses, steady hands. On the charge of breaking and entering, we find the defendants not guilty. Colt exhaled. Ox closed his eyes. On the charge of criminal trespass, we find the defendants not guilty. Rachel squeezed Emma's hand. On the charge of assault and battery not guilty. Murmurs in the courtroom. Caldwell's gavel came down once. On the charge of reckless endangerment of a minor. The foreman paused. He looked at the paper, looked at the jury, looked at Flint. The pause lasted 2 seconds, maybe 3, but in that silence, the entire room held its breath. Not guilty. The courtroom erupted. Cheers, applause. Caldwell banged his gavel 3 times and gave up. Colt grabbed Flint in a bear hug that lifted him off the ground. Ox was crying, big silent tears running into his beard. Sparrow sat very still, coin frozen in his fingers, staring at the ceiling. Langford shook Flint's hand. It's over. Flint looked across the courtroom. Found Emma in the gallery. She was standing on her chair so she could see over the crowd. Their eyes met. She smiled. The first real, full, unguarded smile he had ever seen from her. A 5-year-old smile, bright and whole and missing a front tooth. Flint smiled back. First time in months. Outside the courthouse, the crowd was enormous. Reporters, supporters, bikers from chapters across 4 states. The afternoon sun was high and hard, and the chrome of 100 motorcycles threw light in every direction. Flint walked out into the sunlight and stopped at the top of the steps. Emma and Rachel were at the bottom. Emma broke free from her mother's hand and ran up the steps. Flint crouched down just in time to catch her. She threw her arms around his neck and held on. You're free, she said, because of us. Flint held her for a long moment. He could feel her heartbeat against his chest, fast and strong. It was the most important thing he had ever felt. More important than the verdict. More important than the charges or the trial or the law. A child's heartbeat. The thing he had not been able to feel 15 years ago when Bree was in that hospital bed. He set her down, reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a card. A phone number, nothing else. This is my number. Anything you ever need, day or night, you call. Emma took the card. You already gave my mom one of these. Now you have your own. Rachel appeared behind Emma. She looked at Flint. Thank you, Rachel said. You raised her, Flint said. I just followed her lead. He stood, nodded to Rachel, turned to his brothers, 150 of them spread across the courthouse steps and the street beyond, standing with their bikes in the afternoon sun. Let's ride, Flint said. 150 engines started. The sound rolled through the city like distant thunder, rattling windows and turning heads. The convoy pulled away from the courthouse in a booming, steady line. Chrome and leather and engine noise disappearing down the boulevard. Emma stood on the courthouse steps holding her mother's hand, watching them go. She watched until the last bike turned the corner and the sound faded into the hum of the city. Mom? Yeah, baby. I want to go home. Let's go home. They walked to the car. At a red light, Emma spoke. Mom, I don't want to draw the building anymore. Rachel looked in the rearview mirror. What do you want to draw? Everything else, Rachel nodded. The light turned green. She drove. That evening, Emma sat at the kitchen table with a fresh box of crayons and a stack of blank paper. She drew their apartment with flowers out front that did not exist yet but might someday. She drew the sun big and yellow taking up half the sky. She drew herself on a swing set, smiling, arms stretched wide. And in the corner of every drawing, small, steady, always there, she drew a single motorcycle. Below one drawing, in careful letters that leaned slightly to the right, she wrote 3 words. They came for us. Rachel found it on the table that night after Emma had gone to sleep. She held the paper to her chest and stood alone in the kitchen and cried. She cried for the 2 months she had spent searching. She cried for Nora Pritchard, who would never draw anything again. She cried for Emma, who had walked through something no child should ever walk through, and come out the other side still drawing suns and swing sets and flowers that did not exist yet. And she cried for 150 men on motorcycles who had answered when no one else would. Flint kept his promise. He was there when Emma called at 11 on a Tuesday night because she could not sleep. He was there when she had her first nightmare about the basement, and Rachel called him at 3 in the morning because Emma was screaming and would not stop. He drove across town in 20 minutes and sat on the edge of her bed and told her about Bree, about his daughter who had loved bicycles and butterflies and the color green, about how he had lost her and how the losing had broken him and how for 15 years he had carried that brokenness like a stone in his chest. But then you walked into my parking lot, he said, and I didn't save Bree. I couldn't, but I could follow you, and you saved them. You saved them too. We saved them together. Yeah, Emma said, together. She fell asleep with her hand on his forearm, the grip of a child who had learned that sometimes the only thing between you and the dark was someone willing to hold on. Flint sat there until her breathing was steady. Then he stood, pulled the blanket over her shoulders, and walked quietly out of the room. Rachel was in the kitchen holding a cup of coffee that had gone cold. Thank you, she said. Always. He drove home in the dark windows, down the warm air carrying the smell of pine and cut grass. He thought about Bree. He always thought about Bree. But for the first time in 15 years, the thought did not come with the crushing weight of everything he had failed to do. It came with something else, something lighter. Not peace exactly, but the beginning of the understanding that what he had lost and what he had found were not separate things. That the love he had carried for a daughter who was gone was the same love that had made him crouch in a parking lot and listen to a 5-year-old girl with a map. That grief and purpose could share the same heart. He pulled into his driveway, turned off the engine, sat in the truck for a long time watching the stars. Then he went inside, hung his vest on the hook by the door, and slept through the night for the first time in longer than he could remember. In October, Dale Murchison was formally sentenced. 47 consecutive life sentences. He was led from the courtroom in chains and would never see daylight again. Grant Pritchard was not in the courtroom for the sentencing. He was at the cemetery sitting in the grass next to a small headstone that read Nora Pritchard, age 7, beloved. He sat there for a long time. He did not speak. Some conversations do not require words. The Hells Angels completed 500 hours of community service, each at a children's shelter 12 miles from the Iron Forge. They built a new playground. They painted the walls. Ox installed bookshelves in every room with his own hands, and each shelf had a small plaque that read for Nora. They still rode by Emma's school every morning. A line of motorcycles, chrome and thunder rolling past the front gates at 7:45. Emma stood at the fence and waved. They waved back. Her teacher asked her once why the motorcycles came every morning. They're my friends, Emma said. They check on me. 8 children went home to their families, slowly, carefully, with therapy and nightmares and small victories that looked enormous to the people who loved them. Wes went home to his mother and slept with a nightlight for a year, and then one night turned it off himself and slept until morning. Maya Langford went home and drew pictures of dogs and horses and never once drew a building. Drew, the oldest, went home and did not speak for 3 weeks. Then one morning at breakfast, he looked at his mother and said, I'm hungry. She made him pancakes and cried into the batter, and he ate 4 plates. Emma Calloway started first grade in September. Her teacher said she was the quietest kid in class. She sat in the back row and paid attention to everything and said almost nothing. But she drew the most detailed pictures anyone had ever seen. Precise, careful, every line deliberate. She drew houses and trees and animals and suns and people on swings, and always, always, in the corner of every drawing, a motorcycle. She drew the sun in every picture, big and yellow and warm, because she had spent 2 months without it and she would never take it for granted again. Some people asked whether the bikers were heroes or criminals. Talk show hosts debated it. Lawyers argued about it. The question bounced around the country for weeks, growing louder and more complicated with every retelling. Emma never understood the question. To her, it was simple. She had walked out of the dark. They were there. She had asked for help. They came. That was not heroism or vigilantism or any other word that adults use to make simple things complicated. That was just what people do when children are in danger and the clock is running out. They come.